I'd just like to welcome you. My name is Louise Jackson. I'm the director of the Alumni Career and Education Program with the Alumni Association here at Michigan. And of course, I'm joined by the incredibly renowned Jeremy, who's going to be helping us as we talk about LinkedIn and LinkedIn for those of you breaking into tech and the tech field. Jeremy, a real pleasure to have the Amazing Blue with us again today.
Oh, wonderful. Thank you for having me, Louise. This is a real pleasure as a Wolverine myself. And I would just ask everyone who's joining in, I know this is a webinar, and sometimes when we hear webinar, we think, okay, we're going to turn our brains off. We're going to check our Gmail on the side. But this is not that kind of webinar. This is super interactive. And so I want to start off on that note by having everyone come to the chat and let me know what program you graduated from in Michigan or what program you're in if you're a student, as well as your graduation year or expected one. So for example, for me, I put that into the chat, and I would love you to do the same. Just give me a sense of where you're coming from. And we'll really tailor this to your specific needs. So welcome to Isha, to Miriam, to Praveen, to Susan, to Marissa, to Aubrey, to Erica, to Rasul, Prashant, Irina, Anna, Smarak, Anita, Darian. I'm seeing a lot of fellow Rossers. Welcome. So glad to see that, as well as some great folks from our arts and sciences, from engineering, from public health. Love the diversity of backgrounds here. Folks who are still in school, all the way to folks like myself who've been out there in the world for a little while. So I'm thrilled to have you all here, and welcome to Catherine, Anna, Pack, everyone who's joining today.
Jeremy, can I quickly dive in? I just wanted to preface our session before I fully hand things off to you. I was remiss to cover a quick bit of housekeeping for those of you joining us. And thank you so much, Jeremy, for kicking off with some really cool intros and really getting to know you. I know webinars can feel a little bit like I'm just talking to you. So really love that we're getting participation from everyone. We will be recording the session, so we will be sending that recording out to you. So please look out for that email from the Alumni Association. You can access that. We also are going to be sharing some additional resources with you from Jeremy. And while I'm about it, Jeremy recently published this awesome book. So we're going to be sharing that. We also at the Alumni Association partner with Jeremy on offering the LinkedIn Masterclass, which is a lengthy course that you can take on really sort of reverse engineering LinkedIn, the LinkedIn recruiter's license, and really gives you a deep dive into LinkedIn. So please look out for those resources that we will be sharing. Thank you, Jeremy, for your partnership on all of those resources. We really appreciate it. I'm going to hand things off to Jeremy. We're going to do the best we can to get to your questions. If there are a ton of questions, please look out for the additional resources that we sent you that do our very best to try to address as many questions as possible. Get those questions in the Q&A so we can make sure like them so they can filter up to the top and we can ask Jeremy. All right, and I'm going to hand it off. Jeremy, take it away.
Wonderful. And I'll just say, even though the session is being recorded, I'm giving out some bonus goodies that Louise doesn't even know about, only to folks who are stick around for the last segment. So as tempting as it may be, I'll just watch the recording later. We all know we never get around to it. We never watch the recording. So stick around to make the most of today's session. Okay, so all that said, today is all about the tech industry. And Louise and I were just chatting about this ahead of time. It's been gangbuster hiring for the last 2 years in tech throughout the pandemic. But there are signs that the good times may be coming to an end all of a sudden, with hiring freezes at Facebook, at Twitter, at Uber, with massive layoffs at a number of startups, and also with just sort of a downturn in the tech economy. And so what I want to prepare you with is whether the good times continue or whether they come to a screeching halt, you will have everything you need to break into this sector. Okay, that being said, I want to start with another huge shout out to Louise, to Brooke. If you haven't done so already, please send them a little love in the digital chat. Could be your favorite emoji, your favorite words of praise. But these are the folks who are working hard for the Maize and Blue every single day, bringing you sessions like this. So please send Louise and Brooke a little bit of love right there in the chat to kick things off. Thank you, Ben. Thank you to everyone who's sharing those kind words. And then, as I mentioned, this is not your typical webinar, and I'm not your typical webinar presenter. I was a kindergarten teacher before I came to Ross. And so I'm going to be throwing lots of teacherly habits at you. Pop quizzes, role plays, live demos, lots of Q&A. Keep those questions coming into the Q&A section, and we'll get those answered in real time. Okay, now I got to tell you, as I mentioned, my story is a little strange. I started out as a kindergarten teacher in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and then ultimately, through the power of Michigan, was able to work at all the companies I was excited about across Silicon Valley, and I work at Khan Academy today. That being said, I think the thing that may sound familiar, whether you're a current student or a grad or someone who's been out of school for a while, is that when you were at Michigan, you probably had all these classmates, maybe even folks like yourself, who said, hey, if I want to become a consultant or a banker, or if I want to be, some very tried and true path, there's a very clear way to break into that. So for example, if you wanted to be a consultant, all you had to do was read this Bible of consulting, case in point, and you were on your way. And yet if you want to break into the tech space, all you were left with is questions. Do I need to be a computer science major? Did I have to go to a school on the West Coast? Then I hear about all these jobs in tech, things like BizOps, BizDev, Corp Dev. It's kind of like this alphabet soup of roles. What do they really mean? And then of course, while there may be the McKinseys and the Goldmans of the world that are snapping up Wolverines left and right, places like Google, places like Apple, just take a really long time to hire. And it can be really frustrating if you're on the outside looking in. And so I want to replace all those questions and all of that chaos with some structure, a really clear path to go from wherever you're sitting today into the tech industry. And of course, as a former educator, I want to come back to one of the classic pedagogies of all time, which is the scientific method, and say, hey, if you want to break into tech, you have to start with a hypothesis, not about something in chemistry or physics, but about your own career. And then you've got to get empirical data to test it out. And only then can you start to apply your findings towards landing your dream job. And so I want to start with this critical first step, which is all about getting your hypothesis into place. And I want to start with a pop quiz for you, which you can answer right in the Zoom chat. So give me an A, B, or C. If you're a tech recruiter at a giant like Google or a tiny startup like Khan Academy, and you are looking for top talent on LinkedIn, because that's where recruiters look, what do you think you search for? Do you say, I need someone with an MBA or a BA? I need someone who went to a specific school, so University of Michigan or Ross, or I need someone to do a specific function, a product manager or a product marketer. So what do you all think? I'm seeing a lot of C's come in here from Praveen, from Callie, from Sanket, from Chelsea, from Notch, from Susan. I see that Claudia says B. I believe there are a couple others as well, but mostly C's across the board. Elizabeth says, I hope it is C, and I hope for your sake, Elizabeth, that you are right. And indeed, I'm happy to say that you are. And to prove it to you, check out this screen right here. Now, this is LinkedIn that you're looking at, but it's not the LinkedIn that you and I are used to, the free tool that you can use anytime. Instead, this is a special tool called LinkedIn Recruiter that every recruiter across Silicon Valley and across the tech world pays $10,000 per year for, because it gives them access to all of the world's talent, more than 800 million professionals. And so if you understand how this tool works, you can make it work for you. And of course, the critical first insight is that recruiters, yes, they may care about Michigan and they may care about your MBA or your BS, but what they really care about is, what can you do for me? Can you do this specific job? Because that's where I start my search. And so the problem for tech wannabes or future tech employees is that finding that right function can be really hard. Again, there are so many different roles out there, especially on the non-technical side. And so to help you understand what these roles really are, in true kindergarten teacher fashion, I want to tell you a story. And not even just a fanciful story, but a true story. A story about the fabled Apple car, which, as you probably know, is currently under development right now in Cupertino, a couple miles from my house. And so how the Apple car is being developed is a story of amazing Wolverines, amazing talent across the board. And that car is being built based on the great analysis of the business operations or BizOps team. So this is a team of analysts, former consultants, former bankers who are crunching the numbers on the electric car market and basically giving Tim Cook, Apple CEO, an idea of, if we go down this road, is this project going to be successful? And so if they like what they're seeing and they share great insights, Tim says, you know what? You guys have the green light. Let's make this happen. But there's a problem. Even with all of Apple's existing talent, their existing engineers, their existing designers, they don't have a lot of folks from the car space, from Michigan, from Detroit. And so they have a people operations or HR team that goes out and uses LinkedIn to poach that talent. They go to Tesla, they go to General Motors, and they bring them over to Apple. But even that is too slow, hiring one person at a time when you need a full army of engineers. So now the corporate development or corp dev team says, hey, Why hire one person at a time when we could go out and buy 100 engineers if we buy a small startup or another player in this space? So corporate development is all about mergers and acquisition, bringing in awesome rockstar talent like you guys through the power of acquisition. And then in terms of what these folks are actually going to build, you have the research function. And there's two kinds of research in the tech world. There's quantitative research, often called market research, where you're understanding the demographics, who's buying electric cars, what are their backgrounds. And then there's qualitative research, often called user experience or UX research. And this is much more one-on-one or small groups, where maybe you're doing a test drive in someone's Tesla, trying to understand what don't they like about it? Do they want more cup holders, fewer cup holders? What's the pain point that we can solve? And then in terms of bringing all these insights together, you have the classic product management role, often called PM. And product management really is kind of like the captain of the team who's bringing everyone together around a shared vision. This is what we can build when our forces combine. But even the best product manager can't do it by themselves because there are so many tasks, so many responsibilities. And to herd all those technical cats, you've got to have a project manager who's got the Gantt chart, who's doing the stand-ups, who's making sure everyone knows what they're accountable for. And then to take this project from the world of bits and bytes into the world of atoms, you have the operations and supply chain team, which is getting assembly line capacity, getting partners to actually build out this car. And then you go from the world of supply development to the world of demand generation. So if we're going to have people lining up to buy Apple cars, even at $100,000 a pop, you need marketing, and specifically product marketing, to understand the audience and to start bringing that message of a revolutionary new product into the consumer mindset. But even for the most dedicated sort of Apple fanboy or fangirl, they're going to need a little more convincing. They're not going to just plunk down $100,000 sight unseen. They're going to want to actually do a test drive. And the problem for Apple is they have exactly 0 car dealerships today to enable that. So now their business development or BD team says, you know what? Let's forge a partnership here, maybe with Hertz. Hertz is going through Chapter 11 bankruptcy. They're in this really terrible car rental commodity business. What if we threw them a lifeline and said, Hertz, we're going to give you exclusive rights to rent the Apple car for 3 years in exchange for offering test drives at all of your 5,000 locations around the world. And just like that, that deal solves Apple's problem and it solves Hertz's problem. That's business development. And at the same time, Apple doesn't want to just sell 1 car at a time. They want to sell 1,000 cars at a time. So if they want to seduce the Ubers and Lyfts of the world, these big fleets of cars and these big corporate buyers, they're going to have a sales team with account executives that are going out there getting these deals done. And then once those deals get consummated, who's going to make sure that the customer stays really happy over time, that they not only renew their contract in the future, but they buy even more and they tell all their friends? Well, that's all about customer success or account management. That's working with existing customers to keep them really happy. And then finally, just like this whole project started on a spreadsheet, it's going to end on a spreadsheet when the finance and accounting teams hopefully make Tim Cook a very happy man and they announce those final numbers. So there you have it, a dozen different roles, all open to anyone, no technical background required. But once you know what they do all day and the skills they require, you can figure out which one is a good fit for you. And to help you do that, I want to walk you through a little bit of a thought experiment right now. So imagine all the kinds of work in the world on a spectrum, from super analytical to super interpersonal. And so, for example, you can think about things that are all about digging into data, working on budgets, working on spreadsheets, working by yourself to crunch the numbers as really analytical. And then you can think about things like leading teams or influencing others that are much more interpersonal in nature. Now, close your eyes for a moment and think back to your peak experience in the workforce, whether it was an internship or a previous job, and the kind of work that puts you into a flow space. You probably heard of this term from psychology, the idea that you were so engrossed in what you were doing that you lost track of time. Before you knew it, it was midnight and you were still deep in the project, so enmeshed with what you were working on. Well, I want you to be getting back to that experience over and over again. So think about where that experience fit on the spectrum. And then when you have that in your mind, open your eyes and compare it to all these roles across the tech world. So for example, if you are much more leaning towards, Jeremy, I was working on a pivot table and I was doing all these VLOOKUPs, and I was kind of like Neo in the Matrix. I was just flying through the data, and I love that moment. Maybe business operations, maybe market research could be a great fit for you. On the other hand, if your peak moment was leading that team, getting people to come together across different backgrounds, maybe people operations or customer success or sales could be a better fit. And then if you were somewhere in the middle where you were dealing with data, dealing with insights, but then bringing it into a team environment, and something like product management or project management could be a really nice fit. So think about what that ideal role might be, because that's going to be your hypothesis. And then I would love for everyone to come over to the chat right now and chat in your hypothesis. Give me a sense of which roles you might be excited about. So you can say, Jeremy, I'm interested in BizOps or project management. And I'm going to use this to get a sense of what folks are really passionate about. So Praveen says PM, Isha says BizOps, Brian says customer success, Elizabeth says market research, Marissa says product marketing, Bing says design. Okay, a lot of great interests here. What I would love to do is give one lucky Wolverine a chance to chat with me directly so we can actually see how this plays out, how you might fine tune this hypothesis so you can really move forward. So if you want to be that lucky Wolverine, all you've got to do is raise your hand on Zoom. And whomever is first to raise their hand will get a chance to go one-on-one, and I'll help you be really focused as you launch your tech career. And I see that Brian was first. So Louise or Brooke, would you mind unmuting Brian's line so we can chat directly?
Brian, I did go ahead and allow you to talk, so feel free to go ahead and approve that.
Thank you so much. Hey, Brian.
Okay. Well, I'm not really a hockey player, but I guess I won the face-off.
That's right. Yeah. You would be very good at Jeopardy, Brian. You've got that fast trigger finger. I love that. And so, Brian, tell me this. Tell me a little bit about yourself. What did you study at Michigan? What have you been up to career-wise? And then what are you thinking about tech industry-wise going forward?
Michigan was an MBA in marketing and management technology. Background behind that was mechanical engineering prior to that, and trying to find a place. Well, and also I've done program management for about the last 12 years.
Awesome.
And so I'm not sure if I want to stay in that area, or think I'd like to get back to the marketing area, which I was in before, product management, before moving more recently to product development, program management.
Got it.
So I'm trying to figure, but I found it hard to get back into marketing when you've been out of it for 10 years.
Yeah, totally. And so let's come back to this peak moment idea, because I do think so often as, MBAs or Michigan grads, you can often get caught up in FOMO, just trying to do sort of follow the crowd, when everyone else is excited about. I want to come back to your own true North Star. What do you love doing more than anything else? What's your peak moment, Brian?
The peak moment for me is definitely when I'm working on something and figuring out how to solve a customer's problem.
Interesting. And give me like a specific scenario. Tell me about a time that you were trying to solve a customer's challenge and what that felt like.
I would say one of them when I was working at Mercury Marine, it was just looking at what does the customer feel when they perceive, what is their perception when they're actually accelerating in a boat? Because we built and sold motors for boats, and one of the things that some survey results gave us was our perception of the throttle was not as good as some competitors.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of different factors in there. Was it the amount of force you had to put on? Was it the amount of how smooth it was? Was it was the force uniform throughout the travel when you're hitting the throttle? And so just trying to figure out what could it be that the customer perceives as good or as better was really something that I enjoyed digging into, and then transferring that to the engineers to say, hey, this is what the customer feels is good. How do we make that feeling happen in our product?
Yeah. Oh, I love that, because it's such a perfect melding of your background. It's physics, mechanical engineering, meets psychology, human insights. How
Yes,
do those two
exactly.
things, fuse? And so I have a couple recommendations for you, and these might be a little counterintuitive, but if your superpower is the ability to do a Vulcan mind meld with another person, understand what it feels like to be in their shoes, here are 4 different roles you might want to consider. So first of all, on the more analytical side, something like user experience research, where you're actually sitting down with someone and trying to understand what are your pain points? What do you need in your life? That could actually be a really fascinating application of your unique gifts.
Definitely something that I've been thinking about, but a little too far away from it to move directly into the role, I think, but maybe I'm underestimating it.
Yeah, and we can talk a little bit about direct versus indirect hops. And we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah, because I think that that's one thing that it definitely is where I feel the sweet spot when I get into that UX type thought process.
Okay. Next up is, of course, product management. And just to be clear, product management and project management are a little bit different. Well, obviously, a lot of similar skill sets, but
Mhm.
product is more about understanding external customers, and project is more about working with internal stakeholders.
Mhm.
And so for the product role, which I would recommend, the very best products in the world, like the iPhone, for instance, are all based on insights that the Apple team had about how people wanted to interact with technology. They didn't want to have a big old keyboard and have all these barriers. They wanted it to feel like magic. Tap a button and get a result. And that kind of intuition, that kind of understanding of the customer led to some of the most successful tech products ever. So that's product management. Then down on this line, I think actually any of these roles could be a good fit. Marketing, sales, business development, because at the end of the day, to be a great product marketer, to be a great salesperson, to be a great biz dev leader, you've got to understand the person on the other side of that wall. You got to feel what it feels like from their perspective, and then come up with something that speaks to that. And then finally, customer success could also be a good fit in the sense that to solve customers' problems is essentially the essence of that role. You have someone who is a Salesforce customer or a Microsoft Office customer, and they're not getting enough value out of it. So they're not going to renew next year. How do you understand the disconnect? How do you fill that gap? So of those 3 or 4 different roles there, any feelings, Brian, in terms of the one that feels most natural?
I think the UX or the product management.
Okay, I love that. And so you had mentioned that you had done product management or more project management.
Well, it depends on what company you're in because they use the terms interchangeably a lot. I had done product management before moving to my last role, which was 10 plus years, and that was more project management, internal product development, leading a team to develop computers actually that ran John Deere products.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. And I know the John Deere technology has been in the press quite a bit recently because of the right to repair question. So
Yeah.
very cool. So here's what I would say to answer directly your question around, do I go straight for the job that's obvious, or do I find a way to get into the job that I'm really passionate about? So I think you could certainly call yourself a product manager today because you've done something similar.
Yep.
And so that could be a real slam dunk role for you. On the other hand, if you're even more passionate about UX research, what I would do is I would make a case to recruiters that, hey, all along, I've always been doing UX research. So whether it was at John Deere, whether it was in the boating industry, I've always been talking to customers, gathering insights, sharing those insights with our product team, because that's exactly what a UX researcher does every day.
Mhm.
And if you can make the case that you've been doing it your entire career, now you're more of a shoo-in than an outsider. How does that sound?
Yeah. And that fits with another time too, is when I was in the auto industry, I was working on car stereos. That was 15 years ago, and there was very few really good high quality systems. And we put one in for Ford in the Mustang, and we did grassroots user experience. We just put the prototype system in, took it out to customers, to car shows, to different things like that, owners groups, and got feedback right there.
Oh, I love that. So cool. So Brian, I got to thank you so much because you have kicked off the session in true Michigan fashion, leaders and best. And you have set the bar high for every future volunteer. So thank you for being such a rock star.
Thanks.
Okay. And, basically what Brian just demonstrated for everyone here is it doesn't have to be rocket science, even if you're still new to the tech space. If you can connect, not based on just terminology or the weird titles, but on this core superpower that makes you awesome at something, and you can find a direct connection in the world of tech, you're off to a great start. So before we move on to the next section, Louise, any questions in the Q&A that you wanted me to speak to?
No questions as of right now, so I think we can move along, but definitely I'll weigh in when those show up.
Okay. And just a quick reminder, please put them in the Q&A so we don't miss them in the chat, but I will speak to a quick question from Ben. Ben says, how about business development versus sales? And then also, what is people operations? So it's a great question, Ben, because biz dev, business development, and sales have very similar skill sets. It's about reaching out to new stakeholders outside the organization, engaging them really effectively, and then ultimately closing deals. The big difference, however, is that a sales team is all focused on revenue and achieving quota. Can I drive enough contracts and enough revenue that I hit my goals for that quarter or for that year? Whereas business development is actually usually not about revenue, at least not in the tech space. Instead, it's those synergistic deals like I was talking about, kind of like, as you might recall, Apple did one with Singular back in the day before it was AT&T Mobile, where they gave them exclusive access to the original iPhone in exchange for getting all these concessions about visual voicemail and the things that made the iPhone really special. So no money was exchanged, but it was a pure exchange of value in terms of one company's strengths and the others. So if you want to do something that's a little more salesy, but without the quota hanging over you, business development could be a good fit. And then people operations, or POPs, is basically just HR. It's the whole gamut of talent acquisition to talent retention that includes everything from recruiting, talent management, and then also helping people sort of be supported in their careers all the way to the top, including learning and development. Okay, great questions. Let me now move on to my next step, which is testing out your hypothesis with real data. And so let's talk about the number one reason that people ultimately walk off their jobs. The reason I'm bringing this up, I know it might seem a little premature, is that at the end of the day, the whole point of you landing a new job is that it's going to be a better job, one that's not going to make you walk off the workforce because you're going to be so engaged in what you're doing. So if you had to imagine, what is the number one reason people cite for quitting their jobs? Is it A, poor compensation, B, the Michael Scott effect, bad boss, or C, lack of fit with their role? So what do you think? A, B, or C? Give me your best guess. And I see Isha saying B, and Susan agrees. Claudia says C, but Crystal says B. Mega and Nina and Ben say B, as do Sanket, Sandra, and Brian. And I would say mostly folks are saying B with a smattering of C's. And it turns out that according to one of these leading journals in the HR space called Employment Relations Today, the leading reason for people leaving their jobs is actually not lack of pay or even a terrible boss like we are all led to believe, but it's poor job fit, just someone who is not in the right seat on the bus. And if you've ever read this book, Good to Great, one of these sort of business guru books from about 10 or 20 years ago, you know that the very best companies out there do one thing effectively compared to all their peers, which is they don't just hire great people, because any good tech company can hire great people, but they get the right person in the right seat. They match their superpower with the role where they can leverage it. And so to test out your theory, your hypothesis, what I would highly encourage you to do is to test out that seat. Does it feel like the right fit? Or is there a better spot on the bus for you? And I think the best way to do that is to avoid the trap that I fell into when I was in your shoes, which is, here I am, an introvert. I don't really love the idea of reaching out to people that I don't know. So let me talk to my good friend Google. And so I plugged this into the Google search engine. Lo and behold, there were 17 million results telling me that I would love to be a PM, and I took the plunge. Unfortunately, it turned out it wasn't the role for me. It wasn't a good fit for my strengths as a former kindergarten teacher, as a storyteller. It just wasn't a good play to my unique gifts. On the other hand, if you want to be way smarter than me, do what savvy Wolverines have been doing for generations, even before LinkedIn existed, which is reaching out to the Maize and Blue network. There are so many amazing Wolverines in every one of these spaces, and they would love to share their experience with you. So you're not just getting Google's word for it, you're talking to an insider. And to demonstrate how this works, I would like another brave Wolverine to raise their hand on Zoom, and I will show you step by step how to reach out in a diplomatic way, to ask the right questions, and to get the right information you need to test your hypothesis. And I believe that Anita was first this time. So Brooke, if you wouldn't mind giving Anita access, I would love to chat with her. Okay, Anita, how are you?
Hi, I'm fine.
Great. And Anita, just like Brian before, tell us a little bit about yourself and then also your hypothesis.
I recently graduated with my bachelor's in biomedical engineering, and I've been looking for a job, but then also learning that I may be more interested in the tech space. And I think my hypothesis when I really got into a flow state was doing like biotech research on HIV. But I think I liked more of the organization level of it, just having a step-by-step instead of like actually the research. So I think my hypothesis from what I've been hearing is probably maybe project management and having like a step-by-step flow of everything. So yeah.
I love that. And Anita, would your friends say that you're one of the more organized people they know?
I don't think they would say it personally in my for my life,
Okay.
but I think they would say that I'm good at making lists and making schedules and things like that.
Which is the heart of project management, right? Taking the chaos of the real world and then breaking it down into a process and a format that actually gets stuff done. And I love that. I love that approach. And by the way, congratulations on your recent graduation, Anita. That is so awesome.
Thank you.
So let's get you this perfect role. And I think to really kick the tires on project management, again, let's reach out to some of those Wolverines who are in that space. So here's what I'm going to recommend. First thing that I always love to do on LinkedIn, and I actually used to work on this product when I worked there, is come over to the University of Michigan page on LinkedIn, and specifically to this Alumni tab. And the reason this is so powerful is that without paying LinkedIn a cent, you have access to nearly 500,000 Wolverines in all these different walks of life and all these different creative endeavors. So I highly encourage you to bookmark this page as well as everyone out there and come back to it often. And then you want to start to filter a little bit and say, of these hundreds of thousands of Wolverines, which ones are doing the things that I'm most excited about? And so in this case, you might say, I want someone who's a project manager. So we're going to put that all in quotes, just like we do in our Google searches. And now we're down to about 18,000 alumni. Now here's where it gets really fun, Anita. When you see the companies where they're working, do you see any that are exciting to you? Or are there any companies that you would want me to put in instead?
I think just from my personal, what I use and excited by, I really am interested in like Apple.
Okay. Any others?
I have a few people like peers that work at Deloitte, so that's also interesting.
Very cool. I love that. And so check this out. With just a couple of clicks, we went from 800 million professionals on LinkedIn to about 500,000 Wolverines to about 18,000 project managers to fewer than 100 who are doing our dream job at our dream companies. How does that feel so far?
It feels less overwhelming.
Exactly right. And that's exactly right. Like, I don't know if you're like me, Anita, if you're an introvert, but the idea of going to a giant mixer with like thousands of Wolverines and other people just feels so overwhelming. Whereas finding the exact right one person to talk to and having a nice intimate conversation, that feels so much less threatening. And
Yes.
so tell me if there's anyone here who seems kind of interesting to you. So people at Apple, people at Deloitte, just let me know if anyone looks kind of fascinating to you.
I think maybe Angelique, because it looks like the degree she got may be slightly different than what she's doing now. And I think that may be my background.
I love that. And so you're really identifying with Angelique because not only is she a fellow Wolverine, not only is she in the space, but she's actually made a career transition from one world to another. So you know what that feels like. Okay, so you can definitely check out her profile. But if you wanted to reach out and strike up a conversation, how would you go about doing that, Anita? Walk me through the steps. And by the way, as Anita is doing this, everyone, please cheer her on in the chat because this takes tremendous guts to put yourself out there in front of the whole Wolverine community. So Anita, I want you to know you've got your cheering squad firmly in place, okay? I see lots of love coming in from Ben, from Claire, from Isha. So Anita, if you wanted to contact Angelique, what would you click here? Oh no, Anita's having Wi-Fi issues. Okay, so Anita, if you can come back on, we will continue. I'm going to continue in your stead. So let me actually do this to make it a little more fun. Louise, if you were in Anita's shoes, what would you do here?
Thanks, Jeremy. I feel like I've got an unfair advantage, but I probably would see that Angelique and I are both in the official group with the Alumni Association.
Aha.
And then I would go to the group's a listing. I would find all the participants and I would search for Angelique.
Yes.
And
I love that. What a great hack. So check this out. So we're over here on the group page, and everyone should be a member of this group if you're not already. I'm going to include the link right here in the chat. And sure enough, there's Angelique. And here is a really unique thing about LinkedIn and groups. So you might have noticed that if you're not connected to Angelique directly, you can't send her a message directly without paying for LinkedIn Premium. And you're like, oh, in Anita's case, you just graduated. You don't have tons of money to throw at LinkedIn Premium. There's got to be a better way. And sure enough, there is. You can send a message to anyone in the same group for free without buying LinkedIn Premium. So here's our message. And I love that you called that out, Louise. Such a brilliant hack. And Anita, are you back online? Maybe not. Okay. Louise will continue in your stead, but let us know, Anita, in the chat if there's anything else you would do differently. So what are you going to say here, Louise? How are you going to approach this?
So I like to keep approach emails short. Again, Jeremy, I'm feeling like I have an unfair advantage here, but keep them short, so down to 100 words. We definitely don't want to overwhelm people who are really busy. I might start with mentioning our connection first. So how did I find them? So I was able to see that we both have a non-traditional career journey. You were a fellow Michigan grad. I'd love to talk with you for 10, 15 minutes about, how you move from sports management into a product manager role.
Yeah.
So something really simple and straightforward, where the ask is fairly, you don't have to dig too deep into the email to find it.
Yeah. And then you could say, just to make it really easy, are you going to ask for an hour of time tomorrow, Louise?
Absolutely not. 10 to 15 minutes. I like to reduce decision anxiety for especially the director leadership level. So sometimes I even include one or two options, so that they really don't have to spend too much time, looking at their calendar to figure out when they have 10 minutes to talk with me.
Yeah, absolutely. And look at that. In fewer than 100 words, Louise has gone from being a total stranger to someone who's a member of the same tribe. She's expressed an interest that's not transactional, but it's based on curiosity and passion, which everyone responds to. And for this busy leader like Angelique, she's made it super easy to say yes. So she has her foot firmly in the door. Okay, one last big question for you, Louise. I'm sorry to put you on the spot. But when you chat with Angelique, even for just 10 or 15 minutes, what can you ask her to figure out if her path is the right one for you?
That's a really good question. Jeremy, again, I feel like I tend to lean on Steve Dalton's Tiara framework. So Steve Dalton talks about starting with trends, then so ask a question about trends, then moving into insights, then asking about advice, then resources, and last question would be assignments. So trends, insights, advice, resources, assignments. Really great little framework to put in your back pocket to remember for informational interviews and conversations like this. The goal being to build rapport with the speaker and to move from big picture right down to genuine connection that we hope will result in a referral or some kind of advocacy on behalf of the person you're building trust with.
Absolutely. And this is really funny, but Steve Dalton was my personal career mentor when I was at the University of Michigan. I just reached out to him before he published his first book, and I was the guinea pig that he tried out all of his techniques on. So I can promise you they absolutely work because they got me my first internship at Apple. That being said, just to make it even easier, you don't have to ask all those questions. I would just ask one, which is, what do you even do all day? Because I think the biggest mistake we make as people switching into a new industry is we put these jobs on pedestals. We say, oh, everyone wants to be a product manager. Everyone wants to work in tech. And then we actually get there to the promised land, and it's not at all what we expected. So if you can just figure out, is project management about working with people? Is it about working with spreadsheets? And then ultimately tying that back to your own gifts, you can figure out if you're going to be happy, and you can build your own crystal ball ahead of time. So Louise, thank you for pinch hitting there. You are awesome. And thank you, Anita, for getting this started. Okay, let me pause there. This is really the sort of core of the process. Once you have your hypothesis, don't just plunge in and then be disappointed 2 years later. Instead, figure out as soon as possible, does this match what I need to make me really happy in my work life? Now, Louise, are there any questions that are coming in on the Q&A that you want me to speak to?
Absolutely. So I'm going to kick off a couple of these questions. And you've touched on some of them, but I'm going to jump on the ones that have been new. So you mentioned this a little bit. You talked a little bit about introversion. Can you speak specifically to if there are specific roles in the tech field that may be better aligned to our alumni that tend to be more on the introverted side? And I think you touched on it again with your mentioning about not loving large networking sessions.
That's exactly right. And I'm so sensitive to this because, I'm pretty allergic to anything that feels like, oh my goodness, I'm going to spend all my day surrounded by people and now I have to take a giant nap just to recover. But whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, I think that comes back to what really drives your peak experience. Because hidden behind these labels is maybe on the analytical side, I like to have a little more independent time where I can sit with the data, sit with the material, and come up with ideas on my own. Or maybe I get energy from other people. And so I've got to be in a team environment. I've got to be working with others because that's what motivates me. And so if you can draw that connection from your personality to your peak experience, you can flow that right across. And so I would say that in general, and obviously there are exceptions, the BizOps world, the market research world, certainly finance and accounting tend to draw a little more of the introvert side. And then things like people operations, customer success, sales, business development tend to be a lot more extroverted, with folks who are somewhere in the middle, ambiverts as they're called, right there in that middle spot around product management, product marketing, et cetera. So always think about what's going to make you happy, not just the job that would make your friend happy. Great call out, Louise.
Quick question, and the next question, Jeremy, is can you speak a little bit more about the difference between product management and UX? They do seem to be quite similar, but what's the biggest difference between the two? Or does it really depend on a specific company or organization?
Yeah, such a good question. And to be honest, a lot of these jobs, if you map them out kind of on an X and Y axis, you would realize there's a Venn diagram. There's an overlap in skills across the roles. That being said, it's all about prioritization. So for UX research, 100% of your time practically is going out there, gathering insights, putting them together into a form that's useful internally. And as a product manager, you should be doing a little bit of that yourself, and you should be working with UX researchers to do even more. But then you have a big chunk of your job that goes beyond that, which is once I have these insights, how do I convert them into a vision for a product that's actually useful in the world? And then once I have that vision, how do I communicate it in the form of product specifications and wireframes to my engineers and designers to actually build it out? And then once I get the product into the world, how do I measure the success to ultimately ensure that it's doing well and that we're consistently optimizing it? And so as you can see, UX research is heavily over-indexed on that one piece of the process, insight gathering, whereas product management is that full spectrum of roles all the way from insights to execution to post-launch. Great question.
And the last one we've got here before we move along, can you talk about how common it is for people who move from more of the analytical, so the analyze and strategy work, into more of the PM or PMM roles? So again, are there gaps they would need to close to land those kind of jobs?
Yeah, such a good question. So what I've seen really effectively throughout my tech career at both big companies and startups is that it's much easier to get any job in tech once you're on the inside than when you're on the outside. And it all comes back to the power of relationships that we were just talking about, which is if you are a market researcher and you are working really closely with product managers, and you're like, hey, I love what you're doing, and I would love to have your job someday. Guess what? When the product managers see how awesome you are at your role, and they're seeing how much you collaborate with them really naturally, when there's a new PM opening, they're more likely to be interested in hiring you as a known quantity internally than a random stranger externally. So if you are already inside the tech industry and you want to move horizontally, just know that it's all about relationships, all about building that bridge from where you are today to where you want to be in the future. Great question. Okay, I know we're down to our final 15 minutes. So let me finish up with our last step here, and then we'll take a bunch more questions before we close. So now here's the really fun part. You've done the heavy lifting. You built your hypothesis. You reached out to a ton of Michigan alumni. Now it's time to reap the rewards. So quick pop quiz to close out here. There is this language called structured query language. It's basically a programming language exclusively for data that every tech company in the world uses to understand how its users are engaging with their products. For the product management job, again, that captain of the team, the quarterback of the team, what percentage of product management job descriptions require SQL? Is it as low as 8%, as high as more than half, or somewhere in the middle? Give me your best guess. So Bing says B, Kyle says C, Joseph says A, Elizabeth says C, Sanket says B, you says A. Everyone is all over the map on this one, which is great. I really confused you now. And what I'm very proud to say is that the answer, unbelievably enough, is just as small as 8%. And to prove it to you, check out this data. You can actually run this search yourself. If you were to go to the job board Indeed and say, show me all the product manager jobs that have SQL anywhere in the job description, not even required, just shows up somewhere, that's 690 jobs. Okay, a lot of jobs. But if you were to do that same search and say, show me all the product management jobs that don't have SQL anywhere, that's 7,500 jobs, more than 10 times. And so to understand what's going on here, because we so often fetishize technical skills, recognize that tech recruiters are not focused only on, hey, do you code? Do you have these fancy software skills? But instead, can you do the specific job that I am looking to fill? And if you look specifically at job descriptions, what you will notice is that the vast majority of jobs we've been talking about today are not focused on being gifted at programming or being gifted at data science, but instead being gifted at working with other human beings in a couple of different ways. Number one, can you understand other human beings, understand their needs, understand their pain points? Number two, can you collaborate really well with other human beings? Can you bring them together in a shared vision to get stuff done? And number three, can you influence other human beings? Can you motivate them to buy or try something for the first time? And so if you can understand that key point, you can understand any job in the tech world. And to show you how that looks, let me show you a job description that I was going after back when I was at Michigan, and how I made the case that even as a former kindergarten teacher, I belonged in that role. So first of all, the job description was full of all this tech gobbledygook, things like target audience, qualitative research, focus groups, user engagement, blah, blah, blah. And then here was my resume as I came into Ross. Taught kindergarten in Bed-Stuy, worked with families, got everyone engaged in school events. Not a lot of connections. And you can see why when I first started applying for these jobs, I kind of got nowhere. But then when I finally wised up, I started to realize, hey, even though this sounds so different, I've actually been doing these things all along, just with different labels. What if I reshape and reframe my roles and experiences as more tech focused and less teaching focused? So instead of saying, hey, I got to know my families via home visits, I say I developed insights on my student audience, ding, 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 keywords right out of the job description, through a combination of field visits and in-person interviews, again, paving the way for 100% family engagement. Again, speaking the language of the tribe that I want to join, not just the one that I've been a member of. And so if you want to see how this works in the context of your own LinkedIn profile or your resume, I would love one final volunteer to raise their hand, and I will give you a little LinkedIn profile makeover to make the case that you belong in any tech role out there. So Claudia, you were first this time. And Brooke, if you wouldn't mind giving Claudia the mic, I would really appreciate that. Hey, Claudia.
Hi, Jeremy. Thank you so much for this session.
Oh, thank you so much for volunteering. That means so much. And everyone, please send Claudia a lot of love in the chat, because this takes tons of guts and Claudia has got it. So Claudia, tell me this, what is the job that you really want next in the tech world?
Okay, I would love to have a PM or PMM role in the tech industry.
I love it. Okay, so PM, PMM, so product management, product marketing for the folks who are following along on their tech scorecard. And Claudia, do you mind if I pull up your LinkedIn profile, not to criticize, but just to help you sort of
go
kill it?
ahead. Yeah.
Okay, cool. Thank you so much. And again, I'm seeing lots of love for Claudia here, which is the best part of the LinkedIn community, that there are so many folks who are willing to support and help out. So let me pull up Claudia's profile. Do you see yourself on this list, Claudia?
No.
Okay, hold on one second here.
Maybe I can share the link of my.
Oh yeah, if you don't mind doing that, that's even better.
Give me 1 minute.
And thank you to Nicholas and Carol and you and Arun for being such great teammates here. The Maize and Blue know how to support their own.
Okay, so this is my LinkedIn profile.
Oh, thank you so much. That saved me a lot of painful typing there, Claudia. That was awesome. Okay, so you've been in the strategy and sales operations role at Motorola. And you want to switch into product management or product marketing. So let me tell you about a couple of the things that are really essential about those jobs. One of the things that they both have in common is they have to be really focused on their audiences. Whether you're building product internally or marketing product externally, you have to know what your customers want. Tell me about a time you've done that, Claudia.
Well, one of my recent projects inside Motorola Peru was launching our e-commerce website. So we really needed to understand our audience here in Peru, how they work with the e-commerce, because most of people here in Peru aren't bancarized. They don't have like credit cards or are afraid about introducing their credit cards in a website. So we needed to really understand what was the pain points during the e-commerce process for our Peruvian audience here. Yeah.
Love that. And so I can imagine that bullet writing itself, where you say, led customer discovery process for Peruvian audience, generating unique qualitative and quantitative insights that allowed Motorola to launch a new product for the unbanked. And then you have customer discovery, qualitative insights, quantitative insights, all those keywords that you're going to see on both PM and PMM job descriptions, and you're getting credit for it. So that's number one. Let's talk about another example. So both product managers and product marketers have to be really great at analyzing data to understand how their marketing campaigns are going, to understand how the product is performing. Tell me about a time that you were data-driven, Claudia.
Well, actually, part of my role is being the business intelligence person in my office. So, for example, I work with IDC, which is the intelligence market company, to understand how is the smartphone market going through the trends right now. What are the market shares of the different brands? What are the main models selling right now in Peru? So we can understand and compare, okay, what specs these products have that differentiate them from our portfolio, and how we can reach a better position in the market.
Oh, so good. And again, you're going to tie it right back to the keywords of the tech world. You're going to say, led business intelligence efforts for new product launch, create a dashboard to measure market share, and present competitor analysis to company executives. And then you have business intelligence, you have market share, you have dashboard, you have all the sort of key lingo that marks you as a tech insider versus an outsider.
Okay, great. Yeah.
And so I'm going to leave you with one little bonus present here, Claudia. These are just two really small examples. If you want to make sure that you are nailing all the most important keywords, check out this other site called jobscan.co. And what JobScan will do for you is it'll scan your resume or your LinkedIn profile relative to the job descriptions you want. So for example, PM or PMM jobs. And it will then spit out, here are the keywords you're missing, Claudia. And then here are some ways to incorporate them into your profile. How does that sound?
Good tool. I didn't know about that.
Okay. And you can do 2 free searches a month. So again, you don't have to pay for this process.
Okay, great. Thank you, Jeremy.
Thank you, Claudia. You have been amazing. And you've definitely brought us to the finish line here in true Michigan style. So thank you for being a rockstar volunteer.
Thank you.
So let's finish up with some Q&A. If you've got any questions about, hey, how do I do the same thing that Claudia just did on my profile? or other things about the tech industry, from the jobs to the kinds of companies, I'm happy to take any question. No question is too big or too small. All I ask is you put them in the Q&A right now so we can finish up with those in a moment. And then as you do that, I want to give you a quick reminder of what we've covered together, as well as those bonus goodies that I alluded to at the beginning. So first of all, breaking into tech can feel really amorphous, especially compared to more tried and true paths, but it doesn't have to be that way. Don't come up with a whole brand new process. Just rely on the scientific method. Start with your hypothesis, based not on pure ether, but based on what matters to you, your personality, the kind of work you love. Then don't be a coward like me and just sit on the sidelines and hope for the best. Instead, dive in there, talk to the people who are doing it, especially Michigan alumni, and find that perfect fit. And then when you know where you belong, don't keep it locked away in your head. Instead, start to translate your language from where you've been to where you want to go, which marks you as an insider for recruiters around the industry. And to help you on that journey, actually, I'm going to give you 3 bonus steps here. So first of all, if you want to be in touch with me about any of these things, I'm happy to connect with any and all Wolverines from now until you are the CEO of your own tech company someday. Just send me a message right there on LinkedIn. Number 2 is a huge shout out to Louise and Brooke and your entire alumni team. You have access to an amazing tech career course that's normally $200, but it's free just for today because you are a part of this awesome Michigan community. So please click the link in the chat and get access to this course for now and for years to come. And then finally, if you want me to review your own LinkedIn profile to make sure that it's also ready for prime time, I've got one bonus offer, and this ties back to the book that we just published about LinkedIn. If you're willing to give it a shot, check it out. I will review your profile and make sure that it's ready to rock. And that link is right there in the chat. Okay, with all that said, Louise, back to you. What is on the mind of Wolverines across the country and around the world?
Thank you so much, Jeremy. We've got a ton of questions. We're going to do our best to get through as much as we can. We do know we're at 57. Jeremy, before we kick off, I just want to make sure, are you okay if we go a little bit over 1 o'clock? Is that okay with you? I'm cognizant of your time commitment.
Oh, my pleasure. Always happy to help.
Okay, all right, let's dive in. And given the Great Resignation and workforce shortages, what are the trends occurring or emerging in recruitment in the tech industry that might be beneficial? So an accelerated recruitment process to understand, or an openness to non-tech candidates, referrals from employees, etc. So could you give us any insight as to this as it aligns to the Great Resignation?
Yeah, such a good question. Let me talk about what's happening right now versus what may be happening in a few months or even a few weeks. So in terms of what's happening over the last year or so with this Great Resignation, it's absolutely given lots more power to us, the job seekers, which we've historically never had, and that's amazing. So one big piece of advice is, because there's so much hiring, especially in the tech sector, don't just go out there and apply to one company like Google or bust. Instead, apply to a lot of places, put your eggs in different baskets, and then have those companies compete for your talent. What I've seen time and again at Khan Academy, at tech giants, is that companies are willing to bend over backwards when you have an offer, especially from a competitor. And so if you really want to work at Google, also get a job offer at Apple or at Meta, because Google will respond to that so much faster than if they feel like they have you all to themselves. So make sure that you are always the most desirable asset, because everyone wants your services. Now, that being said, if the tech worm starts to turn, so to speak, as seems to be the case right now based on the decline in stock prices and the hiring freezes that I alluded to before, it's obviously going to be a tougher environment in the tech industry in general and for career changers in specific. That being said, I broke into the tech industry in the midst of the last Great Recession, and I know it's possible. And it really does come down to 2 things. One that we've already talked about, which is getting the keywords, getting the verbiage that marks you as an insider, even if you're not an insider yet. Prove to recruiters that you're going to be an easy fit. You're not going to make their life harder. But also, number 2, if you're building these bridges to Michigan alumni at all these cool tech companies, don't just stop there and say, hey, I'm never going to be in touch with you again. Instead, go the extra mile and say, I am now ready to apply for a job at your company, thanks to your amazing advice. Could you give me a referral? I was just giving a speech about this at Khan Academy yesterday. referred candidates are 10 times more likely to be hired than people who only apply online. And you can imagine there are so many Wolverines out there who would love to crack open the door for you, just like Wolverine alumni helped them when they were getting started. So please don't be shy, even if you're an introvert, and ask for that referral that gives you the biggest advantage, even when times are tough.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And just on the referral topic, we are going to be hosting Steve Dalton later. So please join that session. Steve Dalton particularly emphasizes this notion of referral and really builds this into a step-by-step process for job seekers. So join that session. Brooke will be popping that into the chat. All right, moving on to the next question. We've had a number of questions related to contacting or getting in touch with or securing the FaceTime with recruiters and how to do that on LinkedIn. Can you talk a little bit about the value, the pros and cons of connecting with recruiters?
Yeah, this is such a good question because, again, I totally get it. As job seekers, we see recruiters as the face of the company. And therefore, we tend to over fetishize the idea of we got to get that time with the recruiter, otherwise we're not going to be hired. But here's the reality inside these tech companies. Recruiters, as much as I love them, as much as they help me out as a hiring manager, are mercenaries. At the end of the day, their job is to get a body into that seat and then move on to the 100 other jobs they also have to fill at the company. And so they don't have as much skin in the game as I do when it's my team that I'm hiring for and I'm the hiring manager. And so what I would say is, even if you can get in touch with a recruiter, it's not their decision who gets hired, and they're not going to be incentivized to talk to you because they're juggling so many other roles, so many other candidates. Versus if you can get in touch with the actual hiring manager, the person whose life is going to be made awesome by hiring you, or whose life is going to be ruined by hiring the wrong person, they have a ton of skin in the game and they do want to get to know you. And so how do you find these people, you might ask? Well, check out this hack. If you plug in these 2 magic words into the LinkedIn search box, what you will find is for the first time, hiring managers like myself who are fed up with waiting for the right person to come to us are going onto LinkedIn and saying, I'm a CEO, I'm a founder, I'm a CMO, and I want rock stars on my team, which basically opens the door to you to reach out and make your case directly to the decision maker. So yes, talk to recruiters if you can, but if you have even 5 minutes to spend on networking, better to network with hiring managers because all the incentives are aligned around their interest in the role. Awesome question.
I couldn't agree more. Thank you so much, Jeremy. All right, let's dive into a couple more of these questions. So what should I do to get in the job market without experience in the PPM role? So this person specifically says, my education is in H&D, building technology, and it sounds like these, so engineering, a degree in construction technology. So I know that this is a specific use case, but I think maybe we can broaden this to talk specifically about those alumni or students on the line who don't have a degree specific to and or graduate degree, but are looking to get into PPM.
Yeah, such a good question. And so just to be really clear, you have tons of experience, but it's up to you to translate it for recruiters. So for example, if you're in the construction space, you've definitely done project management. You've probably done product management in terms of conceiving how are we going to build this massive new thing. And so I wouldn't talk about, I did this sort of technology or this construction lingo or that construction lingo. I would talk about, I built a roadmap. I led the specification process. I delegated responsibilities. I built a Gantt chart. All the stuff that's specific to the tech world, make sure you translate. And then if you still don't have quite enough experience to make the case, how can you get more experience and solve that chicken or the egg problem? Because again, every company says, hey, we want you after the experience, but you can only get the experience if you get the job. Well, the way to break through that problem is to say, what are some really quick and easy ways that I could build my own portfolio of awesome tech experiences? Here are 3 different ways. Number 1, you could launch your own product. Spend a little time, maybe coming up with an idea, doing your own market research, launch it even in beta, and then basically say, hey, I have gone through this entire process. I know what it feels like. Number 2, could you get more of a freelance role, even if a company is not ready to hire you full-time? So you come over to a site, like Upwork.com. I'm going to plug this in here if you haven't seen it. What you can do on Upwork is you will find tons of people want product managers or project managers, not on a full-time basis, but just to do a little project here or a little project there. And not only are you getting paid for these projects, but you're also developing that portfolio that you point to in your resume and in the interview that says, I've done this job already, I can do it again for you. And then if you want to make the world a better place while you develop this experience, check out the site called catchafire.org. What you can do on Catchafire is you can do high-skilled volunteer roles where you are actually getting to work with awesome nonprofits that need you to help upgrade their website or come up with their first database strategy. And sure enough, when you do that, you are actually getting really great expertise that's going to help you in your own search and putting lots of goodness into the world where it's needed most. So 3 different strategies to build that experience even before you go full-time.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And I love that idea. Definitely. I know your colleague, Austin Belkek, talks about the value validation project. So
Yeah.
way to really illustrate and show the work that you can do to a prospective employer is a really great way to go about this skill acquisition and illustration. Let's dive into 2 last questions. I know we're well over before we sort of tie things up. The one question that we've gotten in a few different places is for those on the line who have our PhD students and or alumni who have suddenly realized through various different means, market saturation, various factors, that the academic job is not going to be a career for them. And they're looking to transition to the tech field. Do you have specific advice for that audience?
Yeah, for sure. First of all, I feel your pain. My brother is a Michigan PhD, my wife is a PhD, and they both had moments in their careers where they're like, you know what? Academia is just not what I expected. I wanted to consider something else. And here's the good news. The tech world, as I've kind of indicated, is totally open to folks from different backgrounds, kindergarten teachers, architects, academics. But again, you can't just go in there and say, hey, here's my 10-page CV that was perfect for academia. Recruiter, will you please read over this entire thing and figure out where I fit? No, you've got to speak their language because no recruiter in the world has the time or the incentive to do the translation work for you. So number 1, your resume or CV has to be a max of 2 pages long. I want you to remove all the academic jargon. No one cares about publication rates or referral rates or anything like that. What they care about is, can you do the job? Can you crunch the data? Can you build the insights? Can you launch the products? And guess what? You've been doing that. If you've written a dissertation, if you've led huge research efforts on your own, you have done the kind of complex, multidisciplinary work that every tech company thrives on, but you've got to label it as such. And then, like we were talking about before, don't just sort of sit back and say, okay, I've done all this on my own and I'm done. Instead, go one more extra mile and find those Michigan PhDs who are in the tech world. And you will be shocked by the number of folks who have gone down this road and then also broken into Google, into Apple, into cool startups of their own. And they're going to be happy to help you do the same because they know it's a tough road and they want to pay it forward to the next generation. So again, build your translation, build your skills, and then build those connections that will get your foot in the door.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. And we're going to tie things up here. We're going to, do we have a second for one last question? I know we have a lot of international attendees. Do you have any final resources that you'd like to share for those in our audience who are trying to do an international job search?
Yeah, so to step away from LinkedIn real quick, and this is such a big opportunity because tech is easily the #1 employer for visa sponsorship in this country. You've probably seen the site before, but I just want to emphasize it. On myvisajobs.com, you can find all the sort of best employers based on who's been sponsoring in the past. And you will notice a lot of familiar names here. Amazon, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Apple, all are sponsoring thousands and thousands of students every single year. So please do check that out. That being said, if we come back to our list of all the different tech jobs, I do want to be really realistic and let you know that there are some of these jobs that sponsor more than others. And it usually has to do with how technical the roles are. So a role like user experience research or sales or customer success, probably not going to sponsor in most cases because there are lots of American students who may have that skill set. However, product management or business operations or operations in supply chain that require a more technical expertise, even if it's not a 100% technical role, that's where I've seen tons of students sponsored over the last decade. And then last thing, again, back to this idea of it's not just what you know, it's who you know. If you come to LinkedIn and you come to that Michigan search page, what you can do is you can kind of do a sneaky search of the alumni tool where you say, show me everybody from this tool who, like me, graduated from University of Delhi for undergrad. And you will discover all these people who now work at Apple and Zomentum and Goodera. And these may be companies that sponsor, especially students directly from your specific background. And so again, you're reverse engineering past people's success to apply that to your own career. Awesome question.
Jeremy, I just love it. You've always provided so much insight and resources. For those of you on the line, I know we've gone well over, but thank you for sticking with us. There's a number of you here. We are going to do our very best to send you all the resources that we referenced in today's session. There was a ton that was mentioned. We also will be sharing the recording, so look out for that follow-up email. And Jeremy, is there any final parting words that you want to share with our alumni?
Yeah, I know how hard it is to be on the outside looking in, kind of like that kid who's got their nose pressed up on the glass, looking inside the candy shop. But just know, whether it's a good time or a rough time economically, the tech world is always open to people with big ideas who want to make big things happen. And if you know in your heart that you belong on the inside, don't let anyone keep you locked out. Tell your own story, find those amazing Michigan connections. You will find that there's so much opportunity in the space. And I think especially as people walk off the job in the Great Resignation, they leave that door cracked open a little bit more for folks just like ourselves. So seize the moment, seize this opportunity, and I wish you tremendous success, because wherever you go blue. Good luck, everyone.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Go Blue. Thank you for all our alumni. Feel free to let us know how we did. Look out for our email with all those resources. Thanks again, everybody.